Rick Manchin, hello.
Hey, how you going, Kay?
I'm not too bad. It's been too long between chats.
Yes, it has. Must be years even.
6 years.
My God.
I think it's 6 years. A lot's changed in that time at both ends.
Yeah, well, look, time goes faster as you get older, so
Yeah.
that's what's happened.
You actually were the person who inspired me as a kid listening to the radio from about the age of, 7 all the way to when I first met you.
Really?
At the age of, to 2NX in Newcastle, which was the big station then. And
It was a great station. It really was. But, I'm biased. I have a particular love for that formatic that was introduced by Rod Muir. So, yeah, I loved 2NX, loved it dearly.
But yeah, I grew up listening to you as a kid and to that fantastic radio station, and who'd believe that several years later as a 15-year-old that you'd end up being my mentor, master and friend. I really had a dream, and you inspired it and ironically helped me fulfill it. So I'm forever grateful.
It's one of the nice things about being a DJ is you really feel that you can get to influence people. And so, when it takes on such a practical aspect as you moving into the career, that's particularly fulfilling, really.
Where were you born, Rick, and where did your interest in radio start?
I was actually born in Mansfield in Victoria, but I don't remember it. I was young and moved around a lot. My mother was divorced fairly early, so she remarried, and the man she married was a teacher, and he moved for every couple of years. So we moved all around Victoria and even up around Alice Springs there for a couple of years. And it was actually up around Alice Springs where I first got really interested in radio. I put up a wire thing up on the chimney and listened to 5AD in Adelaide from up there, and there was some great radio coming out of Adelaide at that time. This must have been in the 60s. For myself, when I started listening very keenly at about age 11, it wasn't until maybe I was 14, 15 that I started to seriously consider radio. I wanted to be an airline pilot. Right. And I found out that I couldn't get a commercial license whilst I was having to wear glasses. And they were changed years later. At the time, it really knocked me for six. I couldn't do my dream job. And at that time I was in Warrnambool in Western Victoria. And one of my friends, it might have been my brother, invited me up to the local station to check it out. And wow, how amazing it was, Action City, the DJs were flying around, everything was, wham bam, and I found it really, really exciting, the atmosphere of an on-air studio. And the music was great as well, and it was all exciting. And I thought, yeah, I want to do that. It's nearly as good as flying a plane, flying the on-air panel. Back in those days, you could choose your own music, and I remember being in the studio and the jocks there were asking me, which track from this Beatles album should we play? I go, yeah, that one, yeah, and it was on air, and wow, it was such a buzz. Yeah, it was really good, and of course that feeling continued when I got my first job in radio. The fact that you had your own show and you could choose your own music, you could promote, new stuff coming up. It was exciting. It was fantastic times.
Which was your first radio station?
3YB in Warrnambool.
Warrnambool, okay.
I started off just by going up to the station all the time saying, hey, can I watch the announcers on air? And I did that maybe for a year or so, and the guy they were called studio managers at that time, said, I'm going to be running radio classes, soon. And after time went by, he did. He started running classes, and I attended those classes for a couple of years before jobs came up. And so that's one of the best ways of getting into radio is to just get to the station and show that you're enthusiastic. And that's, I'm sure, is what got me the job. I think it's, regardless of the industry, I think that is the best way to get in, is to just show, unlimited enthusiasm and, willingness to go right out of your way to be a part of the team. I'm sure you're going to be able to get a job in almost anything. But certainly, I know it works for radio, and it's how I got a lot of radio jobs, through my career, really, I think.
Tell me about that first gig. Do you have memories of your very first air shift? And do you have an air check?
Well, I think there's stuff on reel-to-reel tape I've got in storage, which I haven't had an opportunity to play for many, many, many years. And one day I'll find a reel-to-reel machine, no doubt, and pop it on and give it a listen. But actually, no, I don't have much recorded of my early stuff. A lot of stuff was just on cassette, and those cassettes, ended up deteriorating in time. So I have very little. But yeah, my first radio gig, actually, I don't even remember it. I sort of snuck in slowly. I was up on weekends helping out with the sports shift, getting the tote dividends and things for the guy on air. And later I was on a late night request show. I remember first time going on air with that, and that I was reading out the requests and stuff, helping out the announcer on air. And so that was a thrill to start off like that, because I didn't really have the responsibility of doing a great shift or anything. I was just doing my little bit.
Yep.
And so that was fun and exciting to get on air. But no, I don't really remember my first on-air shift. I'm sure it must have gone well. I remember my first time going on 2NX, and I was scared silly, because I'd finally reached, a highly competitive station and the exact format that I wanted. And I remember I had my foot in my mouth all the time. I could hardly string two words together.
Let's have a bit of a look at your radio journey. So where did the career take you? What were some of the markets, some of the places that it took you? So you start off at Warrnambool.
Yeah, I was there for I was only there for about 6 months, and I was so out of control, a bit outrageous, that they actually put me off. I can't even remember the exact reason they gave me for putting me off. But 6 months later, they repented and said, you can come back if you like, if you tone it down.
You're having too much fun.
Yeah, I was having a ball, They were complaining, that I just sounded like, a kid having a great time. And for some reason, I didn't like that. They wouldn't let me on the kiddie shift at night anymore. They got me on during the day, and I acted very sober. Right. And so they were happy with that. But during the time I was out of work, I sent off tapes to other stations, and during my second stint at 3YB, one of a station in Queensland, 4GY, they said they wanted me. So I came up here to Queensland. Ray Conniff and the Singers and the Gunter Coleman Choir, and it was shocking stuff. That was all right, but they let me loose on nights, and I got a bit of a following, so that felt very encouraging at the time. I was there for about a year, and then out of the blue, someone knocked on the door, and they said they were from 2GF in Grafton, and could I come and work for them? Right. So I thought, hey, exciting. So I went down there, and there were cutbacks within the network, so I was last on, first off, so they told me. And then 4GY took me back. They had a vacancy at that time, so I worked 2 times at 4GY and stayed there for about another year. Then I think I just left. I got the sack from 4GY. A new manager came, and I didn't show him sufficient respect. So I was out the door. I ended up drifting back to my old hometown, Warrnambool, and 3YB put me back on again for the 3rd time. So I was there for another year. I mean, I didn't really learn that much. Most of the people I was working with then, were, try-hard wannabes like me, and they didn't have too many professionalisms. It was only until I really got into 2NM years later that I really started learning stuff. After 3YB the 3rd time, I went down to Tasmania. I was off air for a year or so, and then I started doing some work for 70X.
Oh, okay.
And they were a very professional station. Very, very professional. And I never actually got an on-air gig there. I was just doing stuff in production and helping out with sport and what have you. But it wasn't until years later that I realised it was a Rod Muir station. Uh-huh. That's where Rod Muir really kicked off.
Yeah.
And he left behind a real legacy of professionalism, which I noticed at every station that he touched, basically from there on. I must admit I'm a big fan of Rod Muir because he introduced a formatics which was revolutionary,
Yeah.
and he inspired people in the most professional way. I don't know how he did it, but every station that he had a strong influence on, a level of professionalism and respect was at a completely different level to any other station I'd come in contact with. 70X had a great manager at the time that gave Rod Muir a lot of freedoms in that Rod also at one stage was the sales manager as well as the program director because he had an expertise in both areas. And it was from 70X he decided he'd approach the 2SM group. And he did it, I believe, in a wonderful way. He approached the board of directors directly. And so he presented himself as a package deal where he didn't have to answer to management. He had control over the station and what he wanted to do. And that's certainly the way to do it. Cuts through a lot of the rubbish. I got a tape together and I got a job up in Broken Hill, which I was at for about 12 months. And then I decided that I really wanted to get into the 2SM group.
Right.
And so I was talking a lot to Musselbrook to get into 2NM, to try to get into 2NX. And in the meantime, 2CC offered me a job in Canberra, and they were pretty professional. They were completely different set up to what's happening there now, as were probably all of the stations I'm talking about. And but they were very good in that they had a very good manager, Nick Irby, the
country music fellow.
The country music guy. I think he sounds absolutely terrible as a jock, but as a manager, he commanded a great deal of respect. I didn't actually work with him. He'd left shortly before I arrived. The new manager was not so well respected, but there were a lot of good people there that knew their work, and so it was an interesting station, and we had a good program director, Wayne Mack. He knew his stuff from Sydney. He was a TUW man, I think, and so, yeah, he gave me a lot of guidance. He was actually very good. While I was there, I was busily talking to Don Dawkins at 2NM, and finally a job came up at 2NM, and I left 2CC to go there. And so from 2NM, I got the chance to fill in at 2NX. They had their ratings parties. Everyone's invited to the ratings party, all the on-air teams, so you had to get someone else in. So
Yep.
I was the guy up from 2NM to do the job, and that was my foot in the door.
Right.
And so I did that a couple of times until finally a night gig came up, or mid-dawn floating job. So that's how I got into to 2NX. Keith Harris gave me some advice along the way whilst I was getting ready, so
Yep.
I was making sure I did everything that Keith wanted me to do. As soon as I got to 2NM, it was suddenly that change of professionalism and respect, that I hadn't felt before. I felt so welcome, and it was so professionally run. It was it made it really easy to sound good. And when I went later on to 2NX, I felt it even more so there. I couldn't believe I was so welcomed, which I'd never really felt before, Everyone was so, competitive and backbiting at other stations. You felt you had to, really fight to survive. But it was wonderful when I got to 2NX, and so 2NX is always going to be, in my mind, an ultimate station. I'm sure, other stations in the network may have even been better. 2SM may have been better. I always loved 3XY. I listened a lot to 3XY in my youth, and I just thought they were just fantastic. There's something I can't explain it, but there's something special about that formatics of simplicity, which fascinated me. For some reason, sticking to real basics, like you talk about one song, one artist, time, station, and something else, maybe, right? If you had something else to say. It sounds really boring, and predictable, but because you have all those, that strict formatics in front of you, you found ways of bending it, putting little innuendos in, little twists, and make it really tight and slick and have some fun with it. And you don't hear that anymore. So I must admit, Rod Muir didn't actually invent that format. He went over to
the States.
And he worked, I think, with K-Earth. I think originally it was K-Earth that started that format. You know, the form that he brought it back in was brilliant. He also went for the highly processed sound. He had a couple of compressors working on the voice. In the early days, he brought in the reverb on the voice as well. That had gone from 2NX by the time I got there, and I loved the reverb sound because with the compression, you know, the suck-up of the sound was, everything always sounded full and fat and crisp. Yeah, it was brilliant sound. You don't hear that anymore either.
How many years in total, actually, did you spend at 2NX? At the original
5
2NX?
or 6 years. Yeah, 5 or 6 years. I was there during all their best years when they did 5 years straight #1. So I sort of feel as though I was a part of the success. Increased Little Andy's figures a little bit, which I was very proud of.
Yeah. He's still going too. He's still going, Little Andy.
Yeah, I know. He's a Facebook friend. I see all his posts. He's an animal lover. He's an animal rights man now. So
Right.
I see all his pictures of animals in distress and stuff.
Good on him.
No, good for him. Yeah. I was on drive there for a while, and then for some reason they put me off, and I said, no, this guy that's following me, he'll lose 5%. He's not good enough. And he did. He lost 5.7%. I'll leave his name out of it. Brian James was the program director then. Keith had moved on and tried to further his career at 2SM, but 2SM was, you know, crumbling. Timing was bad, which is a shame because he was a good operator. Yeah, as I say, Brian James was the program director. I ran into Brian years later when I got a job at 2CACC in Canberra, and Brian apologised. I remember I first went into 2NX in 1975. I drove down from Grafton and Little Andy was on air.
Right.
And so I sat in with Little Andy and checked him out for a while. And this was in the earlier building. This was... Anyway, I was surprised checking out Little Andy. Yeah, never said much, but it was always in his innuendos and his microphone technique and his tightness. And he's actually a brilliant operator. He's always a bit cheeky. You had to listen to for a while to understand his little innuendos. And so then naturally you're listening out for it next time he talked, and lo and behold, it would be there. But he was very subtle, so he could get away with it. As I say, it's that formatic that allows that kind of art form to develop within it. And it's something I admire a great deal.
A wonderful station, I think, was it 1989 that things started to change. In fact, 2NX changed ownership and went to a gold classic hits format, and New FM arrived. Was it late 89 or Christmas of 89?
2NX started winding down at the time of New FM coming up. They could see the writing on the wall, and so, I mean, all New FM had to do was just play the same music as us, and everyone would listen to them because it was so much cleaner being on FM. But, you know, having said that, Mike Webb, the man behind New FM, he knew his stuff. He was actually a personal friend of Rod Muir, and so they shared a lot of the same professionalisms, and he was a total professional, and he knew lots of good radio people, which he got up from Sydney. A number of them anyway, obviously through good contacts, and so, you know, the station was hot, and it worked well. And also Mike Webb had a brilliant idea about promotion. He put the New FM name on everything, but he drove hard deals. Anyone that wanted any promotional assistance from New FM had to own the event, have signage everywhere.
I recall that when New FM kicked off, the first survey for 2NX virtually halved.
Yeah.
Big bleeding.
Well, I'm not sure exactly when they changed their format. They went into a really soft format, and they were certainly talking about it at the time I was there, that they were pissing off the kids. They didn't want the kids anymore. They wanted to do, something else, and it was disaster, total disaster. That was before it was sold. They downsized. Anyone that was on above award wages was basically given the sack, and so I was out the door along with a whole lot of other talented people. So they'd thrown in the towel before they had to, really. But
right.
Maybe they knew they were going to be sold anyway because the 2SM group was changing. The Catholic Church wanted to be out. The thing is, though, the Catholic Church were actually a brilliant board of directors. They had people there that were truly compassionate. Some of the people up in the Catholic Church were, brilliantly moral people. And so they did lots of things for their staff directly from that level. They gave us all free insurance and all sorts of things, where they thought about their staff, and they were great, actually. Thinking back on it and all the different radio station owners of work done there, I think the Catholic Church was actually the best. And I'm not Catholic and I don't support them in any way, but I found that to work under them was actually a delight. Yeah, no, they looked after their people. They were genuine.
So when 2NX sort of went through this formatic change, and then inevitably they were sold and became part of the, I think for a while, they adopted the 2UW classic hits format there for a while.
Yeah.
And the same logo and all those sorts of things, and took their night programming. And you actually ended up at New FM. Yeah,
that's right, yeah. And that was exciting. I was really pleased to get the gig there, Yeah. But it was tough going. It was a tough station. It didn't have the atmosphere of 2NX in any way. It was very competitive. And that feeling of family, which other people on your podcast have talked about, that feeling of family, which is in a lot of stations, it wasn't there at New FM. They had enough talented people there to make the place sound great. So
then, of course, did you jump from New FM to the conversion for X13 had already happened to X107?
Yeah. Well, Don Dawkins was programming there.
That's it.
And he brought me over to X107.
Yeah.
So that was exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, it was not like the old 2NX, but it was in a state of transition.
Yeah.
It wasn't really the X13. Everyone wasn't so shouty on air and so vibed up. Their consultant, which basically brought the format to X13, he was gone by the time I was there, so I never saw how he operated. It was okay. I was only there for a few months, really, before they were bought out by 2KO.
That's right.
Or KOFM. And so we moved over to the KO building in Charlestown.
And adopted the old name.
NXFM, yeah. NXFM was good. Yeah, I enjoyed NXFM, though, once again, had problems with formatics. And, I think it was... The difference with the old 2NX was that Keith Harris had done exactly what Rod Muir had done. He approached the board of directors directly and did a package deal with them, so he didn't have to deal through sales and management, and so he had proper control over the on-air sound. And that is the kind of situation you want to be in as a program director, to create something. Otherwise, you're fighting too many other battles. And that's what happens, unfortunately, in most radio stations everywhere. By the time you get to the on-air sound, it's been compromised so much it's whittled down to nothing,
I was going to ask you, just in finishing on your time there at X107 when you first moved over, and of course X107 was in the 2NX building down in Hunter Street West there. That must have been great for you to sort of, in a sense, even though it was completely different. There may have been, like Don and a couple of familiar voices and faces there at the time, but to actually go back into that building, to go back on air in that building.
It was great just to walk into the place. And actually I made a comment about the smell. I could smell the wood panelling, in the corridor to the studios. I said, oh, it even smells the same.
Yeah.
And it was great to get back in there. But already, it had been downsized. The whole front of the building had been closed off and subletted out to other businesses. They stuck a really ugly-looking post-box thing in the beautiful walk-through up to 2NX. They made it ugly. Everything they did degraded it. At 2NX, everything we did had to look great, had to sound great, had to be as professionally presented as possible. Well, not every radio station operates like that, obviously.
Tell me on the opposite side of things, tell me some of the people that you respect most from your time in radio.
Well, I suppose I have to respect Rod Muir more than anyone else, even though I've never met him. But everywhere he went, everything he touched, to me, just seemed to turn to gold. It was just, he left behind legacies. Everyone that worked with him, longed for the days back under his guidance. He just left a trail of brilliance everywhere he went. Very sad to see him get out of radio because it all just slowly faded away. I greatly respect Keith Harris. He didn't seem to have a lot of obvious respect at the time from people, but gee, I respected him, and he was a hard operator, which you need to be. I think Rod Muir is probably a hard operator as well, totally demanding in what he requires. Well, Keith was very much like that. Keith obviously followed Rod Muir's formats. In that, Keith was obviously he was a 2SM jock during the time of Rod Muir, and picked up a lot of Rod's tricks, including the most important one is go directly to the board of directors and present a package and a budget, and a clear line of authority within the station so that he could get things done. And it was because of that he was so successful. But he's also had a great idea about programming and what he expected out of the jocks. He had a very high level of standard required in everything that the station did, either on air or representing the station. Anything to do with the station had to be the utmost high qualities. He was a really good operator, so I've got to respect that. Don Dawkins, I certainly respect that man. He taught me when I first went to 2NM exactly how to be tight, and particularly things like word value.
Yes.
Take all the words out that you don't need. And I really like that idea. I listen to radio now and I hear them waffle on. They don't know what they're going to say next. They're flying by the seat of their pants and just winging it, you know. And they seem to think that's good radio, bouncing off each other. But to me, it's just floppy, So anyway, I admire Don for that. And he obviously liked how I sounded because he hired me at 2NM, and then later hired me at X107, and then he later hired me at 2CCA in Canberra. Yeah, so I certainly am indebted to Don as well as admiring his efforts in radio, that's for sure. And I admire the announcers I work with. There are so many great announcers. Andy Simpson, I mean... He's a rude little fella. You got to love him for it, At a jocks meeting, just, unexpectedly, he'll come out with the most outrageous rude thing, cracks everyone up, The team of outrageous jocks, really performing, you got to have that element.
You do, yeah.
It goes hand in hand, the sex, drugs and rock and roll, there's a certain amount of truth to it. I personally don't like arrogant people as such. I'm sure I said many times to many people, you can be as egotistical as you like, but you don't have to be an arsehole.
Yeah.
You can love what you do yourself, but you don't have to be an arsehole to me. Well, I was surprised when I went to 2NX that people didn't try to override me with their ego. I found a lot of compassionate mateship type of feeling. John Blakey was another great announcer, and the most gorgeous guy to work with. He was, just so helpful and friendly. I first talked to him when I was at Broken Hill trying to work out how to get to 2NX, and I couldn't believe it. He was on air and he chatted to me for hours.
Yeah.
I just felt so blessed that someone would feel, that they could put that a little bit to one side and actually talk to me. Unbelievable. But then, as I say, when I got there, I found just about everyone there at the station had that tremendous attitude. I don't know how Rod Muir pulled that out of people, but I seem to see that every station that he was associated with, the people were like that. Goodness knows what his secret was to get that out of people. Absolutely terrific. And of course, then you didn't have to worry about, nagging arguments, that are happening, frictions within the building. You're a group of people that had time to concentrate on what you're doing. It was it made it so easy to be sounding good, and
great days listening, and obviously great days working too. Where do you think radio is headed, perhaps in the next 20 years, if we look at it where it is at the moment?
I think they're losing their grip. Not because well, actually for a couple of reasons. One is the internet, of course. Now, kids nowadays, they're not listening to the radio. They're on the internet. They get all their music from YouTube, and they're on Facebook. They can chat to each other, and all the entertainment's there via the internet. When you and I were young, now I'm particularly talking about a 10 to 17 age group, which to me is a really interesting age group, because I've always had to fight to say they're really important. And the people in sales always say, no, they're not. They've got no money. We've got to go for the 25 to 39 females or whatever, right? Now, we don't have anyone appealing to 10 to 17s. I don't know of any station that's doing a good job appealing to 10 to 17s. Back in our time, kids 10, 11, 12, 13, sitting in their bedroom, wondering what to do with themselves, they would turn on the radio and get involved with what's happening there.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, at that age, you're not allowed to go out. You can't go to the pub or anything. You're stuck at home. And so you get involved with what's happening on the radio. And I found most of the people in all the request shows I did, throughout my career, most of them were 13 and 14-year-olds that were talking to me on the phones. By the time they were 16, they were moving on to other things. It was the 13, 14, 15-year-olds that really got sucked into the whole vibe of what was happening on radio. Now, of course, there's nothing inviting there. And the people that grew up with radio in their youth, now, sure, maybe they're listening to the radio still now. The next wave is not going to exist. There is no new generation of people coming up that are radio listeners. I have a 15-year-old girl in my house, and she never listens to the radio. Never. It's a different world now, and radio's lost out in a number of ways. Now, technology, for example, it as wonderful as it is, it has not done radio any favours, because as soon as good automation came in, the people at the top wanting to make money that own the radio station, they say, okay, we can put off staff. We don't have to have all these announcers anymore. And they tend to have forgotten that it's an entertainment industry.
Yep.
If you've got nothing up on stage except a robot, well, no one wants to come. And if you've got half a dozen announcers, putting their hearts and souls into their 4 hours, right, you've got something there. There's something entertaining to actually listen to. But with automation, well, when you go and do a voice track for automation, you're supposed to spend half an hour to do a 6-hour shift.
That's
so
right.
It's half an hour's concentration spread out over 6 hours. There's nothing there.
No.
It's empty. It's useless. The entertainment value is absolutely not there. The power structure of radio has changed dramatically. Back from, the 60s and 70s, you had a situation where you actually had DJs. The guy on air rode the music. He picked the music. He promoted the music. He was heavily involved and excited about the music he was playing. He had control over his show, right? And that you've seen the movie The Boat That Rocked. You know, they were the great days of radio. Every jock went on and had something to give and had their own style, and it was brilliant. As time went by, and Rod Muir is probably a good and bad example of the transformation, because he introduced strict formatics of what needs to be done. I mean, he did it beautifully and brilliantly, but all these other stations followed that idea. Oh, take the power away from the jocks, give it to the program director, right? And it's moved now more away from the program director. They might call them content directors or something now. And it's controlled in a lot of cases by a network program director. And so the power has been taken away from the person on air, and it's moved up and up and up and up and up till, well, the person controlling the whole thing is the owner, and he's got absolutely no idea about what radio's all about. And that has been contributing to the demise of good radio as well. The managers don't want the on-air team to be too much trouble. And unfortunately, a lot of the best jocks are trouble. They're troublemakers. They stir people up. You know, they say outrageous things. Now, this is great for ratings, but management doesn't understand it, doesn't like it, and tends to move those people out. The cream has gone, and you've got this skim milk left. And we all know that the power of, particularly regional radio, the power of the station is being local, right? Being involved in what's happening in the lives of the people in the immediate area so that you can relate to them. Well, that's just wiped it out, makes it useless. And here in the Gold Coast, right, just about every station here just does its little 4-hour breakfast show, except for Hot Tomato. Hot Tomato is a local independent, so they've got no one to network from. So they have live jocks. And so, bingo, they go number one.
Absolutely.
That is the way to do it. You've got to have live jock after live jock around the clock. As I say, the people at the top, they've really got no idea of what their industry is all about, and that is entertainment. And they despise the good entertainers, because the good entertainers are a little bit outrageous, and they don't want to have to put up with that.
And if your station in the end has to rely on them for your success, you may have to pay them a little bit more.
Well, sometimes they are aware that sometimes it works, like with Kyle and Jackie O. They're actually really good. I mean, they're highly intelligent, well-organised radio people. They really know their stuff. They tick all the boxes. If they apply that formula of treating with respect and give a little bit of power to, they can have a whole station full of people like Kyle and Jackie O.
That's right.
Yeah, but they don't, and the good people, they end up leaving.
Terrible. Fancy in any business, and especially in entertainment business like radio, you're happy to see the most talented, your best people leave. So many good, talented radio people no longer around anymore. They're doing other things. It's sad.
That's right. One of the people I ran into at New FM was Peter Mobbs. Now, Peter Mobbs is a really good operator, really good top 40 operator. Excellent. I mean, and he ended up going back to Geelong, because Geelong's his hometown, and he worked at K-Rock there for some years. And I was disgusted to see must have been Facebook in the radio section, he posted some comment which indicated that he'd been put off. They were downsizing, and he was put off. Well, there's an example of a really, really good operator, right, that would sit well in any top 40 station in a major market, and he was just put off, and I don't even know if he's working radio now. It's just an example of someone I know of. And I'm sure it's happened a lot.
Look, I mean, for a lot of reasons, and I've touched on with a few people who've obviously already been on Radio Connections before today, but for various reasons, we're all doing other things, and for a lot of people it's a financial thing that they can go off and do other things in their life that give them much more money for a lot less work, and they've got families to balance and things like that. And then I know people who simply have just walked away, great radio people, their whole lives have been dedicated. They've just walked away because they've had a gutful.
Yeah, and that is exactly my position. I really don't think I'll ever go back to radio because I just can't put up with the people that are running it. They force the wrong decisions on their managers to make changes in the stations which do the stations damage. They've got no idea on how to create something great, and they don't want to listen to people that do. But they're all hanging in. They're all still making money. It's become, a sales operation. And it's got nothing to do with it being an entertainment industry. They will continue on this line, for the foreseeable future until they decide they're going to sell out. And why aren't there more stations? They say, it's bandwidth. You can only have so many stations, within an area. Well, obviously these people have never been to Los Angeles, where you can go through the dial and get 100 stations.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And Los Angeles has got the best radio in the world, and so it doesn't do any harm to the quality of radio. They hog their licenses when there could be a decent operator there doing something, worthwhile. Maybe working in Sydney at Triple M might be still okay. I listened to them yesterday, actually, and they're not great, but they're okay.
Given everything we've just said, I'm about to ask you a question that may sound quite funny, but what's a bit of advice you'd give to somebody out there that perhaps used to be me, that young kid right now thinking, geez, radio might be a...
If they're hearing something that they like, if they're hearing a radio station that they really like, then they've got to go knocking on the door. Where are they going to hear a great radio station they're going to be excited about and want to work for? That's my question. What kid now is going to be excited to say, oh, yeah, I want to do that. I want to be a rock star on the radio like that jock there. Radio, you can create an image. You can sound like the most fantastic James Bondy, vibey, cool, intelligent, in-touch person. You can create that image, and it's a fantastic image. But where are you going to find it now? I couldn't create that image for a long time, but I think after about 15, 20 years, I learnt enough technique to be able to do it. And God, I love it.
Yeah.
But it's gone. Radio's not dead yet, but it's dying. It still has an audience with people in cars, for example, driving.
That's probably saving it, to be honest.
It's not that hard with the right people to create something really very, very good.
Correct.
And there are intelligent, experienced, talented people that are no longer working in radio because there's no place for a talented person in radio anymore, well, more or less, that can set up an environment where you've got a great sounding station. You can do an X13, you could do a 2SM of the early 80s, you could do a 2NX, there are people out there that know how to do it, but the owners of these stations aren't interested. It's not their game. They're not radio people. I'm thinking I must have lived in the right time because radio's golden years didn't last that long. They might have come along maybe in the 50s, right? And they died by the end of the century.
What do you miss most about radio?
I just miss being on air, controlling a on-air gig, having kids ringing me up and so excited to talk to the announcer and recording their calls and getting it back in a slick way on air, coming up with funny things to insinuate with the songs and what's happening in the news and and having fun. I miss the adrenaline of being on air. That was great.
Do you miss the art of splicing tape?
It took me a long time to learn of such a thing. I always did drop edits, which had that double whammy as the erase head took out a little bit and then the record head sort of a join. So, no, I got really good at splicing tape. In fact, I'd make a phone call during a song and take maybe five callers on a competition, pull the tape out, mark it off, cut it up and have it on air by the end of the song.
Yep.
So you had to be really quick. Chop, chop, chop. But no, I don't miss the art of splicing. Digital equipment is so much better.
What's the last radio station you listened to? Perhaps Triple M by the sound of it.
Yeah. Triple M I had a listen to, see how Ugly Phil was going, because I ran into him at New FM years ago, and so it was interesting to see his rise to fame. He learnt some good stuff at 2UE, which was a great station at the time, and then got on with Jackie O and did some really good things. So, yeah, he's done good stuff, and it's good to see he's got a foothold still in radio. If
you bought a radio station tomorrow, where would it be and what format would you run?
It's a big if, because as we said before, there's no radio stations for sale anymore. But if there was, it'd be questionable whether it'd be a good investment. Depending if I, out of my heart, would want to run a 10 to 17 station,
right?
Pop rock station. Yeah, well, actually, it wouldn't be pop rock; it'd be hip hop and rap as well. You got to play what's popular.
Yep.
And I'll do some advertising as well. I mean, these kids, they're on YouTube. Why aren't ads coming up for radio stations? It's like radio's completely ignored the medium of now and doing their own thing at their own peril. So, yeah, I would like a station in the major market like Sydney and do a 10 to 17 format and advertise vigorously on the internet, and maybe it would fail, but I'd have a lot of fun trying. There's plenty of talented people that are just not in radio because they're sick to death of the people I have to work for, which is such a shame. But anyway, yeah, I reckon you could get some good people together.
Well, look after yourself, and thanks again, and hopefully we'll touch base again pretty soon.
Good on you, Kane.
Thanks, Rick.
Take care, mate.